first mini lesson. This one is going to be on active and passive voice, both what they are and when you should use them. Okay, the first thing we need to talk about before we can talk about active and passive voice are elements of a sentence. I'm going to talk about two different ones here. So I have this sentence here: I film my videos in my basement. I just want to talk about two things. I identify two things. The first is the subject of the sentence. In this one, it is the noun I. The second one is the main verb in the sentence. And in this sentence, it is the verb film, right? So I film my videos in my basement. I'm going to talk about the subject, right? The subject is the focus of the sentence, obviously. It's usually the first noun in the main clause, but not always. In some sentences, the subject is not the first noun, right? So in this sentence here, we have a prepositional phrase in some sentences, but the subject is actually the subject. Write this down. Sometimes it's implied. In that first sentence, write this down. The subject is implied, right? It's a command. And that the subject is actually you. You write this down. Okay. We'll talk about verbs. There are actually two kinds of verbs, at least two that I want to talk about. The first is action verbs. Action verbs convey action. Duh. The other kind is being verbs, and these verbs are, basically conjugations of the verb to be. So I am, you are, he or she, it or it is, we are, you are, they are. And of course, there are past tense versions of these. I was, you were, those kinds of things. These are right. Just they're verbs that describe a state of being. They convey some sort of being. We'll see how they're used in a moment. They can work really in two ways. The first is to convey a description of the subject. I am smart because I can conjugate the verb to be, right? So here we have that being verb am, and it describes this subject, this state of being. I am smart. It's something that I am. The second way is to convey the subject as having an action done to it. So I am being made fun of for conjugating the verb to be. Here, we have the being verb am, but really we have kind of a verb phrase. I am being made fun of, right? That's kind of our whole verb phrase here, right? It's not just am. Okay. Now that we have those kind of defined, we have active and passive voice. The question is, what's the difference? First, active voice is when the subject does the action, right? So, I created a video to teach active and passive voice. The sentence is written in active voice. We have the subject I. We have the verb created. It's an action verb. The subject, I, is doing the action. I created a video. A passive voice, though, has when the subject has an action done to it. So this video is created to teach active and passive voice. Right? The subject of this sentence is this video. The verb then was created, and so the video has the action of the sentence created done to it. Why does it matter? Right, other than something to write on your essays. Passive voice is often wordier, less direct, and not as powerful. Okay, so it's just not as good, I suppose. But is there more to it? It can hide who does the action, right? So in the last sentence, we said the video was created. Well, who created the video? Well, I don't know. Sometimes this is evidence of racism or sexism, especially in journalism, say 50, 60 years ago. A lot of times, a sexist or racist journalist would use the passive voice in order to hide giving credit to a woman or a person of color. And so instead of focusing on the person who does the action and giving credit to that person, instead the focus is on whoever or whatever the action was done to, and the actor there is left out. So that's one thing it does. The other thing it does, though, is it puts the focus on the receiver of the action, which can be okay. Like in science, for example, if you're writing a lab report, a lot of times you want to use the passive voice because the subject should not be the experimenter, but instead the experiment. Okay, so that's kind of that. Let's do a little practice. All right, so choose which are in active voice and which sentences are passive. So go ahead and pause the video, grab a marker, and circle the ones on your screen and the one that are written in passive voice. Okay. Okay, now that you have written on your screen in marker, bad idea. Let's take a look. Oh, so the first one, the fourth, and the fifth are in passive voice. These are all taken from people's namesake essays. Gogol was initially given his name as a temporary name. You notice a little beaker. I put that because science. It's appropriate for passive voice in science. However, this is not a scientific essay. So Gogol was initially given his name as a temporary name. My question is, who gave him his name? Of course, I know it's his parents, but we see the verb was initially given it's a being verb. It's passive. So Gogol was initially given. It would be easier to say his parents gave him his name as a temporary name. The second one, his name represents how he is in fact not whole. His name is the subject and it's doing the action, representing, so that's active. Identity is a big part of anyone's life. This is active only because it's not really passive. The subject of the verb here is identity. And identity is doing the state of being. It's not having anything done to it, so that's fine. It's kind of more of a descriptive sentence anyway. The fourth one, a complete change in identity is rarely brought about by deliberate actions. So the subject here is a complete change in identity. The verb is rarely brought about. So what is rarely bringing about a change in identity? It's actually the actions. You could say the active way to write the sentence would be deliberate actions rarely bring about a complete change in identity. Lastly, he is invited to a party. Who invites him to a party? Well, I don't know. This is again a passive sentence. You could say Johann invites him to a party. That would be an active way of writing it. Okay. Hope this kind of clears it up. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email me, and I'll do my best to clear them up. Thanks.